Hi, everyone. Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett, thank you for joining us for a special edition of the Mayor's Table. This is a follow-up to our announcement earlier this month regarding the ending of the fight for the San Juan Generating Station and the carbon capture sequestration project. With me today is Farmington Electric Utility Director Hank Adair, who's going to help tell a full, complete story, look at where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going in regards to electric generation and what that means for your utility bill here in Farmington. Hey everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett, thank you for joining us for this special edition of the Mayor's Table. This is a follow-up to our announcement about a week ago about the end of the fight to save San Juan Generating Station, the 1,500 jobs associated with that facility, the $53 million in local and state taxes, and the $100 million of salaries that flow through this area. With me today is Farmington Electric Utility Director Hank Adair. Hank, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, Mayor.
Yeah, I was hoping we could do this episode and have some better news to share with the public, but
something positive, yeah.
But Hank, you've been with the electric utility now as director for 6 years, but you spent your prior career, 23 years, out at San Juan Generating Station, and you're an individual that I respect tremendously, and the burden and the weight that you carry to try and really save the world in this aspect, we use that term here and there, was great, and I just appreciate the work that you did. And I thought having you on today to talk a little bit about what exactly transpired and maybe dispel some wild theories that might be out there of things that have happened or not happened, and maybe educate people on what they can expect, what we can expect going forward, the work that we're trying to do to replace that power that we've lost, and just kind of lay out a roadmap for the future.
Absolutely. I can tell you it wasn't for a lack of effort. There was a lot of sweat equity and a lot of hours put in to try and keep that successful for our community.
We're here at the end of 2022, and so I remember the legislative session in Santa Fe in February of 2019. So we're almost 4 years exactly.
2019, yeah.
When the Energy Transition Act was unduly passed, unfortunately. And the way that we, obviously went hard at it in Santa Fe to try and bring some reality to the discussion of removing 850 megawatts of power from, New Mexico's grid, and what was really going to transpire when those things occur. And of course, sitting there in front of these different committees and listening to, the sponsors of the ETA, the attorneys that were associated with them, the company that was sitting there behind them, and the things that were said during those hearings, unfortunately, were outright lies. I'm just going to be very honest with people. I mean, when you tell folks that removing 850 megawatts of power is going to save you money, already in a time when demand is outpacing supply in places like California and the Western grid in general, there's clearly not going to be a decrease in the cost of your energy. It's going to go up. And that's exactly what we've seen transpire. And I know we want to get into that more, and I didn't really need to talk about the ETA, Hank, but it brings me back to that moment just so people understand that this battle's been going on for four straight years,
right?
To maintain this power plant for the benefit of our local economy, for our ratepayers, for our schools. I mean, there were so many wins involved in the opportunity that has now been lost, that included enchant energy and carbon capture sequestration and utilization. That chance is gone, and I want to be able we can communicate effectively as to why now that fight is over.
Right. And if you look back on the ETA, Mayor, and when we looked at it, we did not fight the ETA on the emissions level, right? The emissions level reduction, which was basically to cut it in half of what a normal coal plant would be. With carbon capture technology, we would have went well past that. We would have went to 95%. So from 1,100, which was a requirement, all the way down to sub 200.
For CO2
For
emissions.
CO2 per net megawatt, or CO2 per megawatt hour, let me rephrase that, a reduction. So we knew it was there. What we were really asking for was the time to implement that. And that is a proven technology. You'll hear many people say it's proven, not proven, but amines been out there for years. What we were trying to prove is it could be done at the large industrial level and we knew we could achieve it. And that's one of the key benefits of everything we fought for, is we've actually proved through the FEED study with the DOE and all those efforts and times and all that experience we knew with that plant to say it can be built full scale at the industrial level with the FEED study.
And that was one of the things, I think, from the very beginning where it felt like, okay, this may be a special moment for us. You had a company that was looking to utilize, natural, carbon flowing out of Cortez, Colorado, CO2 flowing out of Cortez, Colorado. They were looking to utilize that in the oil extraction industry. And then just 20 miles away from that pipeline going down to Texas is, the San Juan Generating Station, where they thought, we could capture man-made CO2, and then we can keep the power in the grid and be able to sell that. And you're like, wow, it's kind of perfect, right? I mean, the location of the power plant relative to the pipeline, and the Department of Energy and the federal government's commitment to billions of dollars into these types of projects really spoke at that moment to me to think, wow. We're in the right place at the right time. The feds help us fund the feed study.
Absolutely.
That ended up coming out with flying colors, and boy, it just felt like we were moving in the right direction. And then things changed, or maybe they didn't change. Maybe it got muddy.
I think it got muddy, and we can walk through that. But I think you've seen it, right? From the International Energy Agency, right? If we're talking 2 degrees C and environmental, and we can talk, is global warming happening, people's opinions, but intrinsically we're seeing a lot of things there, right? Man affects the world. But one of the key technologies, even those proven agencies have said, is carbon capture needs to play a piece in that. And even at the federal level, candidly, carbon capture I'd looked at as an engineering standpoint previously and said, that's a huge parasitic load. It makes a plant uneconomic, let's just say. But that's the same things they said about wind energy back in the day. That's the same things they said about solar in its early days. And tax credits advanced it, right?
Yeah.
Tax credits came with 45Q. They could advance that. That flipped the switch to have the opportunity to prove not only at a global scale, those agencies are based on scientists and engineers, but at the federal level, we were trying to get it to the state level, pure and simple, to consider carbon capture for that portion. Yet the ETA still passed with the timelines it had.
Yeah, and I think it's incredible now. Just last week on Twitter, there was a power plant in Wyoming that has now put carbon capture on, and Exxon is a component of that, and they're touting the carbon capture technology, and I think, man, that's us. That's what we were trying to do, and I can tell you in all those meetings, going to Washington D.C. or going to Las Vegas or going and meeting these folks who are part of the Department of Energy, they were excited about the potential for San Juan Generating Station to be the largest CCS project in the world. They saw so much opportunity for innovation here in the United States, and to see it blossom and grow and spread across the globe. Because let's be honest, we're closing coal plants here in the United States. They're not closing coal plants in other parts of the world. They're building coal plants because it's a very firm, dispatchable, affordable, reliable power source. Right. And so you're seeing more of it grow. So the idea of implementing carbon capture here and then being able to transport it and utilize it in other places, I think the DOE saw that as a great opportunity for United States innovation.
Agreed. And so we've seen that major thing, right? So we looked as a community, your leadership and council's leadership, and the utility as direction, and said, it drives down to, 1, is it good for the globe, for the environment? 2, is it good for the economy? Absolutely. 3, is it good for the schools? And 4, is it good for the utility for keeping low rates? Because we had exceptionally low rates with the agreements we had. And then last, is it good for our community and keeping jobs whole, right? And you and I both know many people that live here that have worked at that plant. We would like to have kept that plant running for. So that was our goal, true, genuine, from the global level down to the individual person's name, we fought for the right reasons.
I agree. The cost associated with this to the city of Farmington was roughly $3 million.
Yep.
We made in a statement in regards to the power cost savings that we had during the final months when the life of the plant was extended, that it saved us roughly $4 million.
Correct.
in buying power from the grid. I think that number in and of itself should be, people need to pay attention to that number, and we can get into this maybe later in this conversation. But frankly, since the time that this power plant is closed, we have seen our power costs have doubled. In some cases, it's worse than that. In some cases, it's not as bad as that. But generally speaking, I mean, each monthly report that I look at, it's doubled.
It's over double, right? So I would say our normal days or normal months, if you will, have been basically double what our historical purchase power prices are. And you're spot on, Mayor. When we, as part of the agreements amongst the other owners, we extended the plant's operation under the existing agreement from July till the end of September. And in those 3 months, compared to us making power at San Juan, compared to buying it on the grid, we saved $4 million. Some of that was part of that negotiation process, and some was the other owners just wanted to keep it going. But a piece of it was probably all those discussions that made that happen. So I'm going to stand by that. That's one of the opportunities we had just to go to September, and that more than offset our costs for our fight. I'll just frankly say it was a fight, because that's what it was, to try and keep the plant going. And so, yeah, dramatically, I'll tell you right now, winter storm events just before Christmas, we've had average purchase power prices of $200 a megawatt hour just based on the cold weather event hitting, and then the demand on the system even across the west. In the northern portion of the west, right, we had extremely cold temperatures, so demand shot up, pricing shot up. And then the war on Ukraine, we talked about that. I think when we talked last September, Mayor, this September, Mayor, even about it, is gas prices with less coal plants and more gas generation on. The expense of gas prices right now are driving electricity prices. Energy is expensive right now, all the way around.
And this is one of the things when I consider exactly what you just mentioned about winter storms or, one part of the energy economy dealing with natural gas. We see prices elevated there. If we're putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak, whether it's in renewables or in natural gas, and we're removing a full set of other options that are available that are affordable, reliable, we lose redundancy in that grid. We lose kind of price leveling opportunities when you have a mix, a portfolio of different power options available to you. You lose some of that. And that's going to cause prices to go up because you're associated with one particular, natural gas being one, or the cost of renewables, or the unreliability of renewables being two. But you've taken coal out that has always been that fixed asset. You turn the switch on, the coal plant runs, and now that's out of the mix. So just frankly stating, sitting in a committee meeting where you've got people who clearly don't know anything about power generation or about grid dynamics or any of these conversational pieces of which you were so eloquent in speaking about, they sit there and they pretend like prices are going to go down because coal's not a part of the mix. Coal forever has been, for us, I think there was years it was $36 per megawatt hour. It was $40 per megawatt hour. That's the one that we utilized the most.
Right.
And there was a time where natural gas prices were so low, which I think precipitated some of this decision-making to remove coal because natural gas was so inexpensive. Well, that's going to change. We know that's going to change. Demand on that market's going to go up and down. We know that's going to change. So, frankly, the policy and the procedures, the way these, our elected leadership looks at these things is, frankly, it's very myopic in my mind. We're not really taking in the full picture and trying to build in kind of stability into our everyday lives. I mean, when I want to charge my car now that I'm going to have to go buy an electric car, I got to be able to charge my car, I got to be able to charge my phone, I got to be able to power my house, my business, everything with one form of energy. That's a little frightening when you have big winter storms that come through and maybe the sun isn't shining for a couple weeks at a time or the wind stops blowing.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, as you've seen it, even in our integrated resource plan, I think you hit it on the head, is you still have to have a well-rounded portfolio, right? So we do have gas in our portfolio. Right now it's about 44%.
Well, I want to talk about that, too, not to interrupt you, but I want to make sure folks know, I mean, there was a portion of our energy that we generated out of that power plant, but we have other forms of generation here, and we've talked about it before, but it's always good to reiterate that when you talk about us having natural gas generation now, we have Bluffview.
Correct.
And Bluffview accounts for 63 megawatts.
63 megawatts, or about 44% of our annual generation.
Annual,
correct.
Okay, and that takes in the peaks and the valleys, the highs and lows. But on an average daily basis, if you took out the peak time in the summer, I mean, are we 99 megawatts per day? Is that normally our peak?
Normally, I would say the normal average peak would be in the 120s, 130s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the 63 megawatts of power coming from Bluffview.
Yeah.
We have the Navajo Dam generating facility as well, which, depending on the flow of water out of the dam.
Right. It's normally I would say the average flow is we get about 12 megawatts over a given year, right? In the springtime, there's more flow. In the wintertime, there's less flow. I'd say it averages 10 to 12 megawatts. On a percentage basis, just Navo itself is about 8% of our total generation in a given year.
Okay. We used to have what we called a peaking plant, Animas, which we have retired the Animas station now.
Correct.
Because of various issues.
Mm-hmm. Basically, it had a lot of like cracking and degradation that was starting to happen in it, and it was becoming unsafe to operate. It would have took massive capital to rebuild it. And frankly, its heat rate performance, look at heat rate to be like miles per gallon performance in a car, was exceptionally poor. And so it was a good plan to retire that asset.
And then we also have purchase power agreements with other groups that make up the rest really and then we're buying off the grid.
Correct, and we're buying off the grid. We have also a long-term agreement with WAPA for hydropower as well, which accounts for about 7% of our total generation. So total hydro portfolio is about 15%. Now we look at how Lake Powell adjusts on levels and how much flow and what future capacity that'll have, but in general it's about 7%. Today, the rest with San Juan retired comes off purchase power agreements in the market, either a long-term agreement or a short-term agreement where we buy day ahead. And we even buy real time. Today, our operators will buy to match the demand today based on where we're at. To match the supply and demand, they'll buy real-time power as well today.
And so replacing what we were generating on our own from San Juan Generating Station, that's now being purchased off the grid.
Today, yeah.
Which, by the way, there's a lot of other, electric utilities who are also competing for that power. And on a day when demand is high, everybody's competing for that power. And that's really what's going to be the driving force behind these large swings in the cost of energy, right?
Absolutely. You're seeing it, as I mentioned previously, one, as long as gas prices stay high and demand stays up for electric energy, that's going to drive purchase power prices or purchased energy prices, and we're seeing it right now. Eventually, gas will probably drop back down again, but that's a key. I wish I had that crystal ball known, is when gas prices will start to drop off again based on timing.
Yeah, and so the things I'm reading tell me that's not going to be for a while, especially as the
Agreed.
LNG market has opened up so much in Europe, and we're sending so much of that gas across the ocean. So
absolutely, we're the number 2 exporter as a nation right now in the world. The United States is. So
we sit on one of the largest basins of natural gas in the world. We have a plan. We've already begun the process of replacing part of the 44 or 43 megawatts that was in San Juan Generating Station. And the first 18 megawatts of that is going to come in the form of reciprocal engine, correct?
Right, correct. So, Mayor, we're looking right now with San Juan not continuing, right? We had plans when we did our integrated resource plan which showed San Juan continuing or not. And we've been already working on the plans that had common threads between that even before San Juan went away, or we reached that final decision on December 20. And so we have already completed the scope of work to build those reciprocating engines, 2 9-megawatt reciprocating engines, and that would be at the Bluffview station. So we actually have footprint there. And we actually took the extra steps to actually upgrade the electrical infrastructure, which we already completed this last year, to be ready, to be shovel-ready so the electrical can handle the input of that power. And so now only the next steps are getting the bids out on the street, which we have completed the scope of works to be ready to bid it, and completing the permitting for it. Now, some would argue, if gas is so dynamic, why are you installing more gas? And some of the pieces that we need that fast response, ability to raise and lower the load and keep that heat rate or that miles per gallon very efficient. And reciprocating engines, or recips as slang is called for, they work very well at high elevations. We're a mile-high city, and so they work up and through those loads and through that design to keep it very efficient. And in the future, if we do put any renewables, we need that fast ramping to offset that to keep the grid stabilized. So all of that is being complete to execute as quick as possible.
And there's other power generation projects that are happening kind of around us. I mean, somebody made me aware of a large solar array they're looking at down by Grants, and that they've actually began some of that work down in that area. There's and other ones that we're aware of around us, and we're in conversations with those entities as well to discuss potentials for long-term contracts for power. Correct? Absolutely.
So if you look at our integrated resource plan, and the top portfolio of San Juan didn't continue, it's said to install 18 megawatts of recip engines. I already talked about that. Well on our path to execute that. Now we just got to look at the financing, funding, and opportunities are out there. The next one is to build a one-on-one combined cycle gas plant, which has both steam and gas generation, right? That's why they call it combined cycle. We are already done the siting studies to build that ourselves, and we're already completing right now what I would call a full-blown detailed levelized cost of energy analysis for that, which will be complete within the next month. And then we'll look at other generation resources that people are building that we know of in the system, and we'll compare whether we build that or we buy that from somebody else, and you weigh all the pros and cons of benefits. And of course, those are big decisions, and we'll bring those to council for a recommendation from staff and then decision making to go those next steps. But we're already well on that path. So the first thing is decide how much it costs to build, decide how much it costs to buy, weigh in pro and con the options, and there's pros and cons of each ones, and then execute that. One of the key things will be on schedule, right? Which one can be completed as quicker, and that'll be part of that pro and con.
Sure.
Then the last of our integrated resource plan was to build 30 megawatts of solar. We actually know of some that are in the site, and potentially some interconnects within our system that actually would be within our grid or our service territory. And we're using the same mindset of them as how much does it cost to build, how much does it cost to buy. And we could not be looking at solar at a better time right now, because with the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the major changes for nonprofits like ourselves, right, because we're tax exempt, is that it used to be tax equity that was done for solar. Now they've changed it for nonprofits like ourselves, that there's a thing called direct pay. So we have the opportunity to see that incentive passed on to us where we couldn't have seen it in the past as public power. So I'm awfully proud of being in public power. It's what keeps our rates low. We're owned by our community. But now that opportunity for that financial incentive allows us to look at even building our own more. And if anything, it has more leverage for those that are building also, for us to compare apples to apples to get the most competitive rate for our customers. So a lot of good things happening right now.
No, it's a really good picture you just painted there, Hank, and I want people to rewind that and listen to that part again, because it's important to kind of put all this into context. And, you know, my comments earlier regarding rate, I'm not trying to scare anybody in pointing out the fact that, you know, electricity prices are going to go up. I'm not trying to scare you. I want you to be aware of the reality, and then transition that into the things that we're trying to do to generate our own, because we have had the ability as a community-owned utility to keep low rates.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been one of the big benefits, and you know, kudos to the forefathers who made that determined effort to purchase a electric utility and operate it at the municipal level. I mean, it's been a real benefit to our area.
Absolutely.
And we want to continue. We want to continue to do that. But there are certainly going to be challenges. New generation is going to be a key component of that. Where the power markets go is going to be a key component to that. But I want people to understand that we are going to look under every single rock for every dollar that's available to help replace the power that we have lost from the San Juan Generating Station. We don't want to put this on the back of the ratepayers.
No.
You know, frankly, when PNM got their bailout in the ETA, a lot of that money was given back to them, and for the hopes that ratepayers would not be impacted. They will. We want to go find those dollars that are going to help us also relieve the ratepayers from any potential huge upswings in their monthly electric bills.
Absolutely. So all of that's going to cost a lot of money. We just talked about
a lot of money.
There is a lot of money. So even if we were to build every piece of that I just mentioned in our IRP, we're talking about $150 million of investment. You're talking $40 million of investment in the very most acute. Let's get this done quickly in the recip engines. That's about $40 million. Then you're talking about $70 million, ballpark for the combined cycle, and that's a rough number, but that's dropped down to about that number. And then you're talking the remainder of that 150 to be in solar. So we need to look at every opportunity we have, because there's grant funding, Inflation Reduction Act funding. There's funding that's out there and opportunities. And to see the same things that other utilities have done from the federal level to the state level to the local level, we need to take advantage of all those opportunities to champion getting that energy infrastructure dollars that should be allocated to utilities just like us and a coal-affected community just like us. When you talk PNM, they're a whole state. Their service territory is pretty much the whole state. When you're talking San Juan Generating Station, the most acutely affected is this utility, Farmington Electric, in this community. So hopefully there's dollars out there, and we know there is. It's just making sure that we have the champions, including ourselves sitting at this table, to make sure we can get the maximum for that. But don't get me wrong, Mayor, in the short term between now and that and those opportunities to get it, we're going to have some higher rates. We've talked about that previously, and we're even seeing that now with the gas and the energy prices the way they are. And we're going to have to work through and weather those storms and maximize it. This utility is spending every day trying to find the cheapest power out there and any and other options to get that purchase power down. But we're going to have to weather the storm until a lot of this generation's built.
Hank, I want to ask you some questions that get posed to me on a much more frequent basis now. So I think it's this, in my mind, is a good opportunity for people to get educated on some terms that they're hearing thrown around out there, and maybe relieve some concerns or just make them more fully aware. I've had individuals ask me whether or not they should go out and buy a big wall generating system for their home. That would be powered by natural gas. They could have their own generation in-house for fear that there's going to be blackouts and brownouts. Could you give us a definition of what a rolling blackout is and what a brownout is, and that way people can be more in the know?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. And so when I look at it, I think there's power that's available, and I'll talk just at a high level and then start drilling into that. And people are concerned, hey, this summer are we going to have brownouts or blackouts, right? I hear all this. I would say, and I can't say never, but say never. I'm not going to sit here while we're filming something and say that'll never happen. There would have to be extreme events that could happen, and it's very rare that I think it even could. I think our biggest risk is there will be power based on the size of our utility out there, but it'll be very expensive, and we're going to have to manage how we control that. But if there was an extreme event, what if? Now we're talking what if, and I consider it extremely low. Then what a brownout is we'll lower energy levels on a given circuit, right? Say key customers that could come off or on. So brownout is not an entire circuit and the whole entire system being dropped offline. And then when people say rolling blackouts, basically an entire circuit. Let's say we have multiple circuits in our system. And what that would mean is one circuit would, if there was not enough energy out there available, we would shut one system down, lose power, or people would lose power in one area for a given time frame, let's say an hour. And then you would turn that group back on and then turn the next group off and then keep rotating it. That's why they call it rolling. And that just takes the load down as a whole. So would people be off forever? No. That would take some extreme event like something damaged something in a weather event.
One of these giant winter storms that tore down infrastructure.
Exactly. That's what it would be. And really, we would announce all of that. The first thing we do is we announce that, hey, we are getting at risk. There's a shortage, and there's even a process. And we reach out to the community to say let's say tomorrow or the next day, we're concerned we won't have enough power. Let's do everything we can to save power. Can we do some energy efficiency? Can we lower thermostats? Can we turn off lights? That's what you would see first before even anything like that would implement, unless something drastic extreme happened like a tornado went through, right?
Sure.
But as you see it with load, we would make those announcements. They're energy emergencies that with notification. Then after that, if we didn't have enough power, then we would do the rotating brownouts and blackouts or blackouts. And basically our system operators already have a plan where they rotate it. And we keep on specific areas we need to, like the hospitals, things like that. There's certain infrastructure that you do not turn off as you do those rotations. So we already have a plan for that. So do you need a generator? Only if you have the most extreme and have the money to invest in it. My mindset is even in those worst case scenarios, you would only be out a little bit of time, only the time in short intervals, if that makes any sense. So the probability of even getting to that extreme of losing things at your home, that's very, 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 very low.
Very, very, very good to hear that. I would just, I would advise folks, first, they need to follow the Farmington Electric Utility Facebook page because that's where a lot of this information gets pushed out. If push came to shove and those things came to pass and we had to do planned rolling blackouts or brownouts, or we had to announce those types of emergency, please, don't wash your laundry tomorrow. Don't run the vacuums. Don't, all these other parts to help us. That comes from the communication out of that Facebook page, correct?
Right. Correct. And even if we had an event that far, we would go to our information officer, whoever that is, and we would say, make these announcements, get this out on the street. That would be something more than we would just put on a Facebook post. Yeah. We would want that announced broadly and as much as we possibly could.
I say Facebook, social media.
Yeah, social media. Yes.
Kind of the broader aspect of that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's good. I think those terms are important for people to know. And if you are in a situation where your power does go out, keep your freezers closed. Keep your refrigerator closed.
Yeah.
Those things will stay cold for
Quite some time.
Quite some time, so long as you're not opening the door and getting in and out of it. Other questions I get asked. There's a movement here, a global movement to see nuclear get back into the mainstay, and as our cleanest, most reliable form of energy, as some would tout it. Is there any opportunity here for us to utilize nuclear? Or the costs are just so astronomical that that's not something we could incorporate into our municipal utility?
I think for our municipal utility, Mr. Mayor, it's kind of a challenge based on our size. I mean, most nuclear generation is drastic, very huge, right? It's monstrous, other than the small modular reactors like the new scale design. I think for there you have to look, there's a long ways down the road to get it permitted for these locations, and then it gets to be a challenge for expense. I think in the short term what you look at is, that new scale small modularized reactor design they're talking about in the northern Rocky Mountains being an installation. The best approach would be to get partnered with where it's permitted in timing, but then you look at the expense of the transmission costs. Look at transmission being like a toll road on a freeway. The cost to transmit the power from northern Rocky Mountains to New Mexico adds a lot of expense on those transmission lines. Now, don't get me wrong, it's something we'll look at long term, because maybe we do what's called a RTO, or a regional transmission organization, and then if those transmission costs went down, that opens up an awful lot of flexibility. But the Western grid's not there yet. As we see that advance, that may give us opportunities to do it, partnering with where they're building it now till it gets to here. But to do it short term and build it here, that would be an extreme challenge, and there's a lot of hurdles and a long ways to go. And also being a small utility, that's a major capital investment for us to do 100%. We would need somebody to partner with, so it makes the odds very low locally. Now, the thing to keep an eye on is the pulse of what happens with the transmission and what happens with the generation that's going on. And it's the same right now, right? The biggest announcement we've seen as an energy is fusion, right? The recent announcement of getting more than we put in for it with lasers.
Right.
That's a technology of the future, but that's to get from here to an industrial application is a ways down the road. But everything starts with the first thought.
It sure does.
Just like carbon capture, right? At the industrial level.
It sure does.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back around full circle, Hank, unless there's anything else you want to touch on as far as a roadmap forward, things people should know in regards to, energy in the short term. We have put out information regarding power cost adjustments as a part of the electric utility bills. You want to expand on any of that?
Yeah, I think we don't do that lightly, and we don't like to, and we're not trying to make a profit margin on that. All we're doing is trying to recover our costs today of what the market's doing in the future, and even what it's doing today, not even in the future. It's just what it is now, and just purely recouping our costs. We don't take it lightly, and we'll drop it or lower it the minute we can, although it's going to be a while before we see that happen. And we just continue to monitor other ways to trim and look at our costs. Even as a utility, we've looked at our spending on other things to try and trim it to offset what energy pricing has been for gas and electric prices. So I guess I rambled a little bit there. It's a habit with me, but we don't take it lightly. We're only doing it because we have to. And the minute we can take it out, we will. We got a great plan for the long term, and we're doing it. You could ask, should we have done it quicker? Well, gas prices and energy prices weren't that much different early this spring compared. The war in Ukraine drastically changed with LNG exports everything in our world. And you can go out and see graphs all over the websites on that. So we're just managing to that. We do have a great plan for the future, and we already are executing on those very, very quickly.
Sure.
And so I think that's what I'd like to end with on that piece.
Good. So bring it last part, just bring it full circle around. People are asking whether or not there's any other recourse that the city of Farmington can take in regards to the life or future life of San Juan Generating Station. What I have let folks know is we have done that recourse. There is no other recourse that we can take at this point. The costs associated with doing any further legal
right.
affairs regarding this situation are very costly. Could lead to other potential litigation being filed against us, and that this last decision by the arbitrators, which essentially allows P&M to auction off major components
which they
out of
already
the power
have.
plant, which they're already doing.
They already have.
That we in order for us to recover those costs, to bring in new parts to the plant would be, well, the lead times would be ridiculous, the cost would be ridiculous. It's just not something that's feasible any longer. Mm-hmm. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate, Mr. Mayor. So we fought a long battle with P&M and with the other owners all the way, and I understand their positions of how they wanted to get there, but we reached a point that there was no longer anything we could agree upon, and so we took it to the arbitration process. And so the arbitration process is the disagreement we have within the four corners of the document. We started a little bit early with a lawsuit because we had to, because they were auctioning off parts quickly, and we needed to try and stay that with the first wave of auctions. With that, we then peeled back and said, let's go down the arbitration process. And with your leadership and council's leadership and staff's recommendations, we said we've got to go to the last final frontier to fight for this plant, which is the arbitration process. And that's what was agreed to by all the owners, and we agreed to it some 40 years ago, is if we have a disagreement, this is the path we'll take, arbitration. And we said in that document and the four corners that whatever the arbitrator's rule would be binding, right? So we reached a point that they did the next auction, which truly had the hearts, the arteries, and the muscles of that power plant, the transformers, the load centers, and the motors. That's what drives that plant, that was going to be sold off and auctioned off, and you can't come back from that. You could say you could buy all of that, but deep down with the way lead times are and pricing right now, that basically, in our opinion, and my opinion, knowing that plant for 23 years, was a death blow if it were to happen. So we took every last step. I would say we fought as hard as we could with that arbitration process. But once the arbitrators ruled that auction could continue, that left basically a plant that would not have the heart, the arteries, and the muscles of that plant to continue. And I love analogies. I apologize for that. But with that gone, how can you survive? You can't. Now, we could have continued down the arbitration process a little bit further, but you couldn't have survived, again, without the key components. And that made the key stopping point for us. And so, you know, this utility in Northwest New Mexico, our style is we do what we say what we do, and that's what we agreed to in the arbitration process, is to consider that binding, and when that became binding, that was the last step we had.
Well, Hank, I just appreciate the work that you have put in, your staff, our legal team, city manager. I mean, everybody who's been a part of this battle, our legal team, you know, in D.C., Enchant Energy. You know, there is maybe some silver lining to this, the opportunity that Enchant may have with Four Corners Power Plant. That potential exists now, as Intech has been a partner in this battle with us as well. But so, you know, hopeful for them in that regard. Also, there's other energy type projects that are happening here in this area. The hydrogen hub conversation is getting very deep right now, so be interested to see how that transpires. And carbon capture is a big component of that plan. So, you know, we were early in on that idea, and hopefully that maybe have grabbed a hold of something, and we can create some good quality economic based jobs that will help this area continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. With the sequestration and that grant funding, right, for the drilling of the wells for Class 6 and the advancement of carbon capture to that large industrial scale, to me, we set the foundation for the next house in this community, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be other gen facilities, or whether it even be our facilities and attaching more environmental controls in the future.
Sure.
I mean, we can be proud of what we did.
Well, I would just say this to all of our, the power generating station workers, our coal miners, their families, everybody who's been involved in this fight, going to Santa Fe, going to Washington, D.C., spending your hard-earned time and money and labor into helping us try and sustain this power plant. I just say thank you. It is obviously heart-wrenching that we weren't able to come through. We wanted to be there for you. We wanted to keep you here in this community. We want you to be able to create a life of your own in the way that you see fit based on the skills that you have. And we're going to continue to try and grow our energy opportunities here in this area. So stay tuned for those opportunities. But know that we did everything that we could. And I stand by that and believe that the fight that we fought was the best fight for the right reasons. And I just appreciate, again, Hank, your leadership, and Rob May's leadership, and Jennifer, and everybody who took up that rope and pulled it, man.
Absolutely.
Really incredible. So any other final thoughts?
No, I think you summed it up where Mr. Mayor and caught some of the other key people that helped fight that right fight.
So, well, thank you for tuning in to this special edition of the Mayor's Table. Hopefully, this opens up your eyes to the full story of what took place there at San Juan Generating Station. We should probably write a book about it. I don't know, do a documentary on it, something. But the world is changing. We've seen a lot of things happening here across energy communities across the United States, and we just have to be resilient. We have to make sure we're doing everything we can to support one another, and I just keep reiterating that. Take care of each other and find opportunities where opportunities are for our families and for our workers. So thank you again for tuning in. We will see you with the New Year's message here on the Mayor's Table. We'll see you next time.